Be advised, suspect is armed and considered extremely dangerous.
Welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio host, and nationally recognized safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Join us each week as we discuss the best and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. Follow Dr. Perrodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.
Hey everyone, this is Dr. David P. Perrodin from down here in the historic North Star Recording Studio on August 13th, 2023, and wishing everybody well. So the Milwaukee Brewers won their 12th game in a row, and the benefit of that is free hamburgers from George Webb restaurant in the Milwaukee area. I'm not anywhere near that, so I'm not going to benefit, but apparently they plan, George Webb, on giving away 100,000 hamburgers. So yes, the Milwaukee Brewers, winners of their last 12 and something like 24 of their last 28, just amazing. 76 wins, 44 losses, best in the majors. So we'll see. I do remember the 1982 World Series and where the Brewers lost in Game 7. I believe they did lead in the sixth inning of Game 7, but it kind of seems like this could be the year for the Milwaukee Brewers. But yeah, 12 games in a row, free hamburgers, including the Armored Ghost. This is going to be giving out free hamburgers that he will grill himself. So time and number and all of that has yet to be determined. So wanted to show a few updates, final updates to the studios. So again, this year, I'm trying to get things kind of organized here. This summer, actually, so June, July, August, was the time frame to update the studio. And that kicked off with, some new hard drives, a new primary drive for the PC, going through and doing the Windows 11 Pro upgrade, and then also adding the new diffuser lighting, and doing just a big kind of clean and sort of the studio, thinning things down quite a bit, and also the new 32-inch Dell QHD monitor, which is in front of me. So all of those things, plus the Sennheiser headset. So really a pretty comprehensive update across the entire studio down here. So I want to share some things that I got today, which I'd ordered from Amazon, which are kind of the final tweaks for the office, at least for this year. I think one of the things that I need to do is to get a little better, kind of like an architect light over in my work area here, but it suffices for right now. But I'm going to just share this image of what the studio looks like with a couple updates as of today. So let's do that. All right. Yeah. Okay. Share screen. Got it. And there we are. Okay, so what you are looking at, that is, kind of where I'm sitting. Exactly, it's where I'm sitting right now. And the armrests are new. So let me make this a little bit bigger. So this is a 15-year-old Hone Basic, BASYX, office chair. So I got this at Staples, again, about 15 years ago. And it's been a very good chair. The cylinder, for height kind of gave out maybe 10 years ago. And I bought a kit. You can find them online. They're like at $12, and it's a chair riser. It's for this issue. And basically, it's little clamps that you put on onto the piston until you get the chair at the appropriate height, and then it never goes down from that level. I don't know, chairfixer.com or whatever it is. I need to look it up because it is really a good. Hang on. I think I've got I want to, since it is such a cool thing, just share. All right. I guess whoa. Chair saver. Okay. So let me just get out of the studio. Here we go. So this is called the Chair Saver Kit, and it is chair-saver.com. So apparently chairsaver.com was already taken, but chair-saver.com. So it looks like these little vertebrae, right? So again, I ordered this about 10 years ago, but I looked and the website still is active and you can buy these. So when the piston, the hydraulic piston gives out to lower or to raise the chair, right? I guess if it gives out, the chair is going to lower on its own. You get a bag of these, and I have one extra in here. So I don't know how many originally came in this bag here. So 5 of these. So I used 4 of them to raise the chair up to the height that it is now. The thing is, like, it'll always be like this height. Unless I add this, I can make it higher, or if I take any of these out. But this was for like $12. This was an amazing fix, which has lasted since I've put this in again. The Chair Saver Kit. I would endorse it if you have a chair that's pretty good and you don't want to get into the whole deal of trying to replace a piston or the hydraulic cylinder and then have it fail in a few years anyway. So yeah, but the arms, let me go back to the image. The arms were polyurethane and were cracking, and I got a hold of Hone, that made the chair, and their customer support, and they don't make replacements for these arms. Now you can get replacements out there, but not for this chair. The sliding mechanism is actually in the arms. So basically I had to come up with some way to keep this chair going. And what I did was, I went online and, it looked and did reviews, looked at reviews, and I found this brand, Alaudi. So this is the name, and they create various cushions that go over arms on chairs, and they also have kind of an emphasis on gaming chairs. So it has a very strong elastic band on the bottom, and it's basically memory foam with a cloth over it. By looking, you can tell that. So went on super easy, and actually I really like them. They're very comfortable. They're staying in place. I can do what I need to do with the arms of the chair because I can tilt outward, inward, move front, back. And, they haven't been sliding around at all. So I think the pair were $20. If I can get 3-4 years out of those, then you can take them off and wash them. Actually, like the foam, you can unzip and take the memory foam out of it. I don't think I would ever do that, but they do. It was kind of weird the first time, I put them on, and because it's so different than having like that cracked hard polyurethane. But so what's the floor made of? The floor is luxury vinyl plank. It's called Cortec Plus. And that was installed 3 summers ago. And it is it has cork and ground cement, and then the vinyl, on top of it. So basically, it's waterproof, meaning if the floor was ever submerged, you got the water out, you could still use the planks; they wouldn't warp. So I guess that's a plus. I haven't had to experience that, but so the thing though with this floor, so this is on concrete, is you still have to use a mat, so a pretty thick mat called a bison mat that I ordered. It's a plastic mat for this chair, because if you're rolling around on this again, and I have the rollerblade wheels, it will basically snap the connections. And even though this is a really good floor, so I did have to have a section of the floor replaced last year, and that's when the bison mat came in. And so that's a little surprising, because you would think that that wouldn't happen. And like a floor that's hard and that's on concrete, you'd be able to just roll around on, but it's really not is it coffee stain resistant? It is, I believe. It's being asked by the Armored Ghost. So, yeah. So it's in this room, and then it just extends over to the other room, which is the craft room. But that was probably one of the biggest initial upgrades to the studio. Is it used to be carpet. When I first moved here, it was indoor-outdoor carpet. And then it was a green, kind of like a lime green carpet, because it was on sale. And the carpet place, gave us a deal on it. And I'm like, well, no one's going to look at carpet in office. And the problem is carpet in a basement just kind of smells musty. It didn't get wet, and we had a cat at that time that was kind of using the carpet as a litter box at times. So it was messy to have that. So by going with the luxury vinyl plank down here, it really makes it a ton easier to clean, makes it a lot brighter. So just a huge plus. And of course, then you don't have any of the musty odor of a carpet in a basement. But yeah. So I do like it. So yeah, go into these arm pads. These are, have memory foam inside of them, and they're on top of the polyurethane armrests, which are part of the chair. I did try to get those off, and I couldn't. Of course, they torque the screws up pretty tight on those, and it's a Phillips head, and it's too easy to strip that out. And then it wouldn't have been easy to replace, because they said they don't make this top component anymore. And I mean, when you're going to the factory, and I'm going on eBay, and at some point I'm like, well, like, what's another option? So I watched a review by a gamer, and it had a lot of views. I think like 10 or 13,000 views. And he posted 3 years ago. He got these and put them on his gaming chair. But he posted an update 3 months ago, and he said they're still going strong. Still really like these. And I have to say they're really nice. I think where it's going to make a difference too is in winter, when this area gets really cold. To have that, it adds a little kind of extra nicety to the office. So, and what else is down in the office, you're asking? Let me see if I have time to tell you. So there it is. So I have a clock, and I was looking for something small. It's 5 inches by 1.5 inches deep, and it plugs into my outlet. So, and it has 2 AA batteries in case the power goes out. So I thought about a battery operated clock like this that I could kind of be more nimble, but then I was like, well, I don't want to do that, because all the reviews were saying it's a great clock, but if you use it like in an office every 3 months, you have to change out the batteries, like 4 AA batteries. And I'm like, nope. So this one, the the lights are dimmable. They're not, you can't change color. I got it in green because that's the color I wanted. It was green, red, orange, or white were the options. And so that just sits over there to my right. And I can move it, anywhere I want. But, and yeah, I mean, it looks great. It's in a good location for me. And I also, found that they sell little shelves that sit on the top of monitors. And I found one at Amazon that, had pretty decent reviews. And I'm, considering maybe getting that shelf and then moving the clock over so it would be on top of the right monitor. So basically that it would sit up here. And that would be okay. Like that would work out fine. But actually, I'm liking having it to the right. And I think that's going to serve me well. It's also not distracting to have it there. That's where I'm thinking more and more if I had it in front of me in my line of view, like it could be a little bit distracting. And, a plus is if I do put it on top of the monitor, it probably is a little easier to see versus having to kind of glance over, but it's really, not inconvenient to have it where it's located. So let me just kind of do the pull out. And again, so as I'm here, it is to my right that I can see that. And for the meetings where I'm using the headset, it's going to be very easy to keep track of time on that clock. But that was something I wanted to do, was to add the clock in here. So a couple additions to the North Star recording studio. So again, that looks good. So what else is happening? Tomorrow is going to be a busy day for me. I'll be getting a haircut in the afternoon, and then in the morning I need to mow the lawn, kind of go shorter. We've had quite a bit of rain. Do edging, string trimming, and then I usually shop on Thursdays, like the Walmart shopping, but I'm going to push that to Friday this week. And tomorrow I need to wash our Buick, our SUV. So just out in the driveway, and it's not like an extensive detailing, but the weather's just going to kind of be ideal for that. 83 and sunny tomorrow, and then we kind of get into the stretch of rain. So tomorrow will be a busy day, but a lot of good things coming out of that. So Armored Ghost is asking, where's the mini fridge? Yeah, I actually considered that once down here, and I never put one in. So yeah, mini fridge and a microwave, right? I could get those two things down here. So, but yeah, the historic North Star recording studio is not equipped with those amenities. But yeah, I am really liking, again, kind of the changes, and those arm pads are just really, just they're arm pads, right? But because they're cushioned and actually the ones were cracking, the polyurethane ones. So, but you put your arm down, and be like, ouch, like what's going on here? So, wow. So what in the world is going on here with this? So, whoa. The SUV just kind of, like I said, it is very much the Clay Martin approach of, no affiliations. It's just a clean machine with no tags on it, no custom plates, nothing like that. So, but yeah, I am looking forward to having nice weather tomorrow to get all of that stuff done. So in the heading of this episode was one thing to never do at a baseball game. And I'm going to bring up, let's do this. So I got to throw out the opening pitch at a baseball game, and I had something really interesting happen. So let's do that. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna share this right now. I'm not going to share it with audio. I'm going to just kind of talk about what happened. So it's the Agorizer. Happy Wednesday. So things to never do at a ball game. So, or a baseball game. So in 2019, my book School of Errors came out, and I was invited to throw out the opening pitch at the Duluth Huskies game. It's like minor league baseball up in Duluth, Minnesota. Beautiful stadium, built in the 1940s, or I think it was built in the 30s, Conservation Corps project, and of reclaimed brick that was downtown in Duluth. So, but really an amazing place. So I'm going to play this video. You're not going to have the audio with it, but let me describe what's going on here. So so this guy right here is basically kind of like the media manager. So he's probably in college, probably 20 years old. And what he is doing right here is he's announcing to the crowd that, hey, we have special guest for our opening, pitch here, our first pitch, and it's Dr. David Proden, and I just published School of Errors. So it was for recognizing my contributions to school safety, and then also to acknowledge that, hey, the book just came out. So he is going through, and he's reading a little bit of an intro script right there. But then, as it might have been right before this, let me kind of see where this takes us here. So he's talking about me and getting me up to the mound there. So he walks up. So right here, he walks over to me, and I thought the plan also was that he was going to give me the microphone when I was done throwing out the pitch, and then I would like say something about school safety, like 30 seconds or something, and that didn't happen. Although we talked about it, and that seemed like, I think it was just forgotten the moment. But over here, like, he goes off and he goes up to me before I go up to the mound, and my daughter also goes up with me, and he says to me, and I don't, and this really perplexed me. So he said to me, okay, whatever you do, don't don't say anything bad about our sponsors. And he's like, okay, then go up there. So let's see, then I'm going up there, just a moment here. But yeah, so this is the guy, and he tells me, whatever it's off, the mic isn't on, right? He's just telling me this. He's like, whatever you do, buddy, do not say anything bad about our sponsors. So I'm kind of thrown for a little bit of a loop with that one. And, the fact that we were talking for like 5 minutes before that, and that's has a really nice field. That was the year they put in their artificial turf. It's a really nice place. So there I am, throwing the ball out here, 2019. I can't describe like how awesome that stadium is. So it's Bolo. I'm throwing to Bolo right there. So Bolo comes out. He was catcher for Duluth, which is close to Canada. So Bolo came out. So, yeah, I have the ball, but the ink pretty much faded on it. So I have a case to my left. I don't know if I should like try to, take my Mont Blanc pen and try to like trace over and restore the the words, because obviously it was just signed like, with a cheap pen. Like, so, and, but anyway, so I was perplexed by this. Like, whatever you do, don't say anything bad about our sponsors, and then okay, go up there and do what you got to do. And I thought about it like the next couple of days. I'm like, what would prompt somebody to say that? So I was thinking, well, maybe they had in their sponsors, by the way, it was like the biggest sponsor they had was a window company. And as you looked around, I mean, there was stuff in the outfield signs and stuff, but like as far as like kind of what appeared to be their primary sponsor, it was like a window company that was kind of regional up there. And so I didn't, there wasn't anything that really like stood out. Like, oh, yeah, obviously, like you don't want to make, the sponsor, the, stadium. Um, I don't, anyway. So I was thinking, did somebody say, did they give the mic to somebody before they threw the ball out or after they threw it out? And then they made some joke and like the sponsor is Windows. So I bet it's a real pain to have a window company as your sponsor, right? Window pane, kind of play on words there. But so I'm like, well, who would do that? And then also like, how would that get to the point where then this guy would purposely make it very clear to me, like, hey, just don't do anything to upset our sponsors. And then I was thinking, well, did something happen in the league, like within close proximity, within a few days of me going out there at some other stadium where somebody threw out a pitch and then said something or did something that was berating a sponsor. So I don't know the answer to that. I'm still kind of perplexed to it this day, but yeah, it's like when Willie Hayes catches the ball basket style, and then he's told never do that again. But it was kind of like, hey, whatever you do, we're glad you're here. We're glad you're throwing out the first pitch, buddy. But whatever you do, yeah. So let's bring me back. So right there's the guy with the clipboard. He's shaking my hand. He's like, hey, good job. Thanks for not saying anything bad about our sponsors. And by the way, I'm not going to give you the mic to say anything about school safety, but they were really cool. They were really cool to me at the stadium, kind of made it as a little bit of a doc event. And then I was taking pictures. They had like a backdrop, not like it was a backdrop down in the stadium's from like the 30s. So it's really got a lot of that charm. But yeah, it's like narrow concourses and all of that. And if I lived in Duluth, like I would just go there every day, like for games. I would work there for free. So I just really like that. But yeah. So whatever you do, do not say anything bad about the sponsors. I'm still trying to think that one out. So if anyone has an idea in the chat, what might have gone on or why somebody would say that, please share it. Because I'm still kind of perplexed by that. Again, the story of what went on either at that stadium or in the league where word got around and they're like, hey, like, we can't lose, whatever Taco Town, whatever was going on for the sponsor. And again, I went to their website and I'm kind of looking around and I'm like, there wasn't anything on there sponsor related that would kind of jump out, like, oh, like, we're sponsored by Hanes underwear or something like that. I'd be like, oh, okay. I guess I can understand where, they'd be like, hey, obviously there's many, maybe little quips you can put in there, but just don't do it. But it was, yeah, again, and I went back, I'm like, well, this is, yeah, it's like a regional window factory. And I was looking, they're like, just everything's cool. So that was before. Yes, that was, you're absolutely right. And I look back at that because the following season was canceled. Um, so it was, who would have known, right, at this time in 2019 to be up there, how much life would change, one summer away, that their season's going to be closed, they're shut down, the stadium's going to be shut down. And so, yeah, I'm really glad that happened. And it was fun for my daughter to go out there and to do some cartwheels and to be on the field, with me. And so, yeah, anyway, things you never do. Never say anything bad about the sponsors. So we've been having good weather here, although the flooding in Milwaukee and the greater Milwaukee areas that happened 2-3 days ago, that's kind of making the news more around here. Like, they're interviewing people where their basements collapsed, right? And these people don't have flood insurance because these areas weren't considered flood hazards. And, they got like a foot and a half of rain. And it's just heartbreaking because they interviewed one guy, he's maybe in his mid 30s, and he said he thought a tree fell on his house, and then he realized one side of his basement caved in. So he had a house that was maybe, built in the 40s or 50s. I was probably 50s. And it was cinder block wall. And but in front, he has these raised flower gardens. And, just, and the place, it wasn't very, it wasn't very big, a smaller 1950s home, but you could tell this guy and this family put a lot into making it look nice. And and he's like, hey, like, my insurance company said we don't cover flooding, and the water took out the wall in the basement and then went up above into the house. And so, like, they're having people come around to assess if you can live in the homes or not. And they're marking some of these homes that saying, you can't stay there. And like he said, I can't, what am I going to do? I mean, I can't take there's more damage to the house than what the house is worth. And now you're probably looking at, hundreds of homes that are going to be falling into that category because people aren't going to have the coverage. And, where these basements have been damaged. And usually then your furnace is gone and all of that stuff. But, wow, it is really heartbreaking, to see that. So, but yes, let me go get out of here. I don't know if any of you have dealt with floods. At one time, I was working, and this is a place that, let's see, Bolo. It must be a return on investments the managers manage. It's Bolo. The biggest rainstorm we had here was probably over 2-3 days, maybe a foot and a half of rain. And if you type in like this in a Google search, so, which is kind of a lot, Wisconsin Dells plus flood plus dam break. So that was right around, I think, 2008, the summer of 2008. We had massive flooding in this area. And Wisconsin Dells, which is very close to where I live, I can bike there. Wisconsin River also goes through Wisconsin Dells. It comes through where I live. But the water got so high, so fast, it overwhelmed the dam, and it basically took out a road, which just washed away a highway, and the entire river or the entire lake drained into the Wisconsin River. and it was unbelievable. So it's making national news, right? All these houses falling into the lake as it's draining, and to this day, like I can still bike to that area, and you can see like how the water hit the opposing bank and just demolished it. So just crazy. So what is it? It's Mike McClune. Whoa, that's good stuff. And I remember then. Well, first of all, I don't know how many hours later in where I live, everything that went into the Wisconsin River floated toward where I live. So there's a levee downtown, and we went down there, and there were hundreds of people standing on the levee, paved levee, and taking pictures because you'd see parts of houses coming down the river. And I remember like water heaters, furniture, like everything was like just working its way down the river. But during this, in the place I worked at, the school district, their town was basically cut in half by this flood, literally, like, and I had to take a 40-minute detour to get to my office. And that was also just crazy. I came home one day from there, and we had something like 5 inches, 6 inches of rain an hour coming down. And I remember I had a V6 Chevy Malibu, and man, oh man, I'm on the interstate in the water. The rain is just crazy, and the water is like up to the sides on the interstate. So it just looks like you're driving on a lake at that point. And I get, and I'm just thinking, I got to be able to get home. And I get off the exit, and as I'm coming down the exit, there's like somebody standing there, and half of the bottom of the exit ramp was underwater, like under like 5 feet of water. So like I had to like drive on the outside of it. And then it was really difficult to find. Once I got into the city, it was hard to find a way to get to my house because I'm on a hill, but other parts of the city aren't. So I had to drive through. Thankfully, I don't think anything was above a foot of water, so nothing like got in the car. But areas that like you'd never think would flood were flooded out, and then got up to my house, and things were okay. But oh my God, that was wild. That was just a wild amount of rain. And then there were places where in the district I worked that they just took entire blocks and condemned them because they had been flooded out. And of course, you're getting mold, and these homes had severe structural damage. And they also took over the school district high school gymnasium as a FEMA site. So I received a badge from FEMA saying that I could access the site, the high school, but there were a lot of conditions on that, like only at certain times, and then you had to be there for a purpose, meaning like you had to you can't have meetings there. The building basically becomes a government FEMA building at that point. So, and people are living in the gym. And one of the things that surprised me, because I'd never gone through this experience, we had actually 2 schools, one on each side of the river, that were taken over, one elementary and then the high school. And they would the military was bringing in potable water. So you'd see these tanker trucks that would say potable water. And people then were coming in whatever they had, right? Because their house is underwater. And FEMA would then, I remember one person brought a truck, and they had a washer and dryer. And they said, they're both destroyed because they were in the house. And there was some way that FEMA wrote a check out to them. I don't remember all the details, but there was like some relief that was given in the moment to kind of get people by. But one of the things that surprised me when FEMA took over the high school is they had armed guards outside, and they had a pretty big perimeter. So it wasn't just like you'd get to the front door and there'd be an armed guard. Like you'd get to where you turn into the high school parking lot, and there'd be an armed guard, and not passively either. Like they're standing there, and they had a perimeter all around the building. So I asked one of them, kind of, can you tell me more about this, because this kind of throws me off. Like, and he said, there's, and some of them were military, and then some of them were like, well, that area was pretty taxed as far as like all law enforcement, so they weren't available. But some were like, off-duty officers who were being hired to come in. And the things, kind of the big themes is one is people come in and they can be very irrational because, of course, they're tourists, their world has just changed, and so we are there to keep order, and also to give an image, project an image of order. So that was one thing, and the other one was just that we're protecting this because this site, because people might be coming into the parking lot and just have things in the back of their truck or on a trailer or whatever. So it was security, but then it was also kind of for some order. And the thing was, like, it was very orderly. People were devastated, but people weren't mean or aggressive or anything like that. But if, of course, you can kind of just imagine, if you suddenly lost everything, and then, you're sleeping on a cot in a gym, or you're pulling into the parking lot there with whatever possessions you have that you were able to get out. Just trying to figure out like what your next move is going to be. So you don't have to worry about, hey, someone's going to come over and take, things that you have. So I have quite a few pictures from that. And it was wild. I'll never forget when the water also like got to the top of the bridge in town and then started to go over, and then they shut the bridge down. And then also they had one power station that was completely flooded out, but they had sandbagged it like crazy. So basically you had this, 5-6 foot area with, probably 6-8 feet of sandbags that was maybe 6-8 feet high around this power station. And the thought, well, if the power station would have gone, like, that would have been substantial. And I remember they had just numerous pumps inside of this thing. So they would, and water is coming by it at a pretty good pace. Numerous gas pumps to pump out any water that's coming in to this. And it was successful. They didn't lose the power station. It's kind of, I noticed when I was doing a walk out to the new subdivision where I live, and there's a larger power station, and they redid the landscaping around that in the last few years to put up large berms. And they also did a lot of security lighting, like big LED security lighting, and they raised things up onto concrete platforms. That area, to my knowledge, hasn't flooded, but it is in a lower lying area, and it does have marshland kind of near it. So, potentially you could run into some flood issues with that. But I think that kind of was prompted by some of the things that happened with the other flooding that I was talking about. But I was just kind of observing that. I'm like, yeah, this is set. And actually the new subdivision has a lot of these areas, because that's in a lower part of town too, like where they're pushing this out. So they have numerous retention ponds, and then if it gets up so high, the water would spill over into large sewage grates, or rainwater, stormwater grates go to the river. The problem is you have to use a water lift pump to get the water over this large hill. So if the power goes out, you'd have to keep that going But basically, if you kind of like just study this, like I was looking at it, I'm like, yeah, like this system could be overwhelmed, and I'm not sure like how bad it would get down there because there were never homes there until just last year and a half, and now this large subdivision is going in this little area. Um, so I was kind of eyeing up some of the houses, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to be like in this house, this house, this house, because if the water did start to, come up, or if you did have some situation you lost power, I'm just not sure. So, but Bolo's like, I don't know. So another reason why I'm thankful that I live on a sandy hill um, is to not have those water issues. I think that would be one of the hardest things to deal with as a homeowner. Water in your basement, and if it's something that happens like multiple times, like the house I grew up in had water. I talked about that in the basement, and it also had a situation where it wasn't that far from where the sewage plant in the city was, and then the river would never come up to like where our house was, like, but the anyway, everything would start to kind of back up from where the sewage plant was. So in our house, I think my dad had a valve, like a large ball valve installed that would, on the outgoing line to the wastewater line, so he could turn it off because it would backflow into the house, and that was horrible. My mom actually took her bowling ball and set it in the toilet in the basement to keep the water from shooting out. It was gross. It was horrible. So yeah. Oh my goodness. But I remember, he had that put in. I think it was kind of a questionable thing. I don't think you could do that today. To have a plumber put on your sewage line to be able to shut it off. It was this big valve. I remember this whole thing, and but then, you also had to make sure then you're not running any water, anything in the house, because it's not exiting. So you would just do it for this time frame. So Sandy Hill is a safety hill. Yeah. To me, I've found just a lot of advantages to living on a hill. And probably one is just not having water having very good drainage is just key, and everything, slopes away from the house. So that's been good. So, and we're off of kind of the main roads too. So you don't get a lot of traffic with that. But I don't know. I like it. Like when I sometimes think about where else would I want to live, I would, be giving up quite a few things that I like about like this area, this property, house, and then also kind of the area we live in town. So anyway, but yeah, so the studio editions have been pretty awesome. I like everything that I've done down here. And again, I'm debating getting that shelf, and it's not that much. It was interesting because I had a chat. Here's a break. It's Pepsi, an unofficial sponsor of the Agrizer. Bottled in Canada. Bolo. What was I talking about? Something about why I like this house and things like that. So, all right, somebody has to remind me in the chat where I was going with that. So, yeah, maybe some upgrades to the studio here. So, Yeah, I'm more and more glad, I guess, that I did the Windows 10 Pro to 11 Pro jump this summer versus kind of seeing how that would play out, because it seems like Microsoft will offer you a package of updates for a year starting in October, but you have to pay like $30 and you have to have a Microsoft account. See, that's the thing that I don't have, is there's no OneDrive connected to this. I still have old um, Microsoft products that I bought on disk, like Windows 2010. The thing with Windows, or I mean, not like Word and PowerPoint and Excel, like that's all reverse compatible. So if you're running like the new version of it, and when students would submit stuff to me, like I could always open it. That was never a problem. And now you've got, all of that stuff on Google Sheets and, Google Docs and stuff, kind of moving a little bit away from the proprietary. But anyway, so I was going to tell us about the, it was not Armored Ghost. We were talking about a hill, and we were talking about living on a hill, and then I don't know. So yeah, the upgrade of Windows 10 Pro to 11 Pro, I just think was a really smart move, because I do not want to set up a Microsoft account where I have to log in for these updates, and then of course you're going to be prompted for a ton of other things, and to use OneDrive, which is I guess their equivalent of a Google Drive to some extent, storing things and being able to use paying a subscription. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I don't want to get tied into subscriptions, and I am not, and I don't have that. So, don't camp in floodplains. Yeah, there's an area. It can't be developed because it's down from my back porch. I can see it, and water will pool there during big storms, and it can actually get pretty deep. And that's kind of in this area where a lot of the water will kind of go. Now, again, like from my house to that is probably 75, 80 foot, like difference in elevation. But yeah, so that's an area that will never have a home down there. Plus, there's a very large kind of regional power line that runs about 150 feet in back of our house, and then it goes over that area, so no one will be building under that. And that power line actually, like, it sounds like that would be a detractor, but like you don't even notice it because there's woods in front of it. And when we first moved here, the power line was actually much closer to our house. It was probably 80 feet in back of our house, and then they put in new poles which are taller, and then they moved them further back, which was a plus because the pole got out of the end of my backyard, which is actually the start of the city owns that, but it's all connected to my yard. So I mowed, and it looks like it's my yard. And then I remember when the crew that they had hired it to clean this out, this area out, and put this pole in, because again, we're talking brush and trees. The guy asked me, he's like, "Do you want me to take all this brush out of your backyard?" Well, I'm like, "Well, this isn't really my backyard because it's the city's." And I said, if you could like thin out an area here, like that would be nice, but just keep the rest, because it's a nice barrier between me and then kind of like the rest of the neighbors. And the same thing with my other neighbor. He said basically, no, that's okay. Like, just leave the stuff there. You don't have to take it out. It's a nice visual hedge in the back. And I'm glad I had them I didn't have to pay for anything. They're like, okay, we'll do a little bit over here, kind of clear this area. And then I planted a couple spruce trees back there. So, yeah, subscriptions. So that's where I got rid of this year. I got rid of not my SoundCloud, Podbean. So that was where the Safety Doc podcasts were stored, and ended that subscription. And then I ended my subscription with GoDaddy. And that was expensive. So thankfully, like actually GoDaddy was much easier to end than Podbean. Podbean, you have to kind of navigate through and find out subscriptions and non-reap. I'm not going to renew and stuff. Versus like GoDaddy, you just call up and then just say, hey. And I was surprised, and I guess kudos to GoDaddy on this one is they didn't try to talk me out of it. I think they did the typical. So why are you not wanting to keep the site? And I said, because I don't use it anymore. I'm not going to use it. And just for one is the cost, but the second is it's just another kind of publicly accessible flank of mine that I'm not updating. So it's also not a good professional look just to have stuff that's not being, curated, I guess, maintained. And they were like, okay. And then I'm like, wow, that was like much easier than because usually like when I would just do regular things with GoDaddy, they'd be like, oh, like, do you want to purchase like this, whatever security level or this, and the guy said, well, we can like delete it right now. I can do that for you. Be gone. Do you want to keep the domain? And I said, yeah, I'll keep the domain, Safety PhD. He said, do you want it redirected? And I'm like, yeah, if you could redirect it to my Amazon book page. So I found that and emailed him the link, and in like 5 minutes he had the site down and he had it so it would go over there. And then I'll decide what I want to do with safetyphd.com. I own that through next November 26th, and then I might put it up for auction. So I don't, what is this, GeoCities? I don't. So I remember building, a number of free websites in the late 90s. Like we had a traveling basketball team, and I forget what those companies were even that allowed you to do that. I don't think they exist today anymore, but they were pretty basic. But again, those early websites were, if you could get any kind of, GIF on it, it was really something, because, that was really a new thing back then. So yeah, I hadn't done anything with the site. So subscriptions, but I wanted to get out of the Microsoft kind of trap. And, this, like I said, everything in this machine now, nothing is connected. Well, I mean, I get the updates, but I don't have to log in. Microsoft, I don't have a Microsoft account. So, and that Microsoft OneDrive. So just glad I don't deal with those. So looking at what I've done in the studio, and if I would recommend things to anyone, I think the first thing is, no, I didn't see that Bitcoin and Ethereum hit all-time highs today. 123,000 is crazy. Yeah. So I don't know what to make of the economy at $37 trillion of debt, and then stock market S&P at all-time highs, and another 400 plus day for the markets. Like, I'm not really a direct part of that. And I guess, maybe to my loss, because it seems everything has been awesome with market stuff in the last, 2 years. But I also remember, being a trader and owning stuff in 2000 when the dot-com bubble hit, and then 2001 when the markets were closed after September 11th, and then 2008 with the housing crash, and then, obviously the pandemic. And, I remember that, those times were really, you'd have just, market, your accounts drop 30-40%. And now it just seems like the markets never go down, right? No matter what the news is. I think something has to happen, because you just cannot have stock markets and, cryptocurrencies that only go up. Because if there isn't a check with that to somewhat balance it, then you're just going to have a recalibration with inflation. Meaning, a tube of toothpaste is going to be $8, right? A quart of oil will be $15. Clothing, just everything is going to recalibrate. We've already, at least I've noticed, my property taxes, insurances, all of that have gone up. But just everything across the board would just become more expensive, to kind of match this what's happening out there as far as like supply and demand. And so I am really, I'm still planning, I have a very kind of fixed mindset. I'm older, so, I've kind of made decisions and set up structures based upon a certain anticipated fixed return that I should be able to hit that target, because it is pretty well below what established returns have been over the last 20 years. So I give myself a buffer. But yeah, if you paid an old Bitcoin, it would seem cheaper. So yeah, I don't understand what the economy, and Aaron Clary has done some podcast on this, but what does the economy look like when you have people not participating because they've generated wealth through crypto, right? Or through being a social media influencer, and maybe an influencer to how you have to access that person is through paying a subscription, right? But there are a lot of people out there doing that. And I remember also from the school side, when I was teaching at the university in the last couple of years, if you were making money and your source of income or side hustle or whatever it was you had to access it through a paid site, and it was maybe more adult content, right? That could be grounds for dismissal, separation from employment. But now you're seeing that, schools are backing off of that. And I was reading some specific cases on that, where people would come in and challenge who had been, separated from employment because the district identified that they had whatever pay site. And then one of the claims where it will start to fall apart for the district was to say, well, this person's performance, and what they do for you is fine. What they're putting out there is behind a paywall. It's not publicly accessible. But then they were saying, well, what if you have people, in the military? Do you have people in the military who were in the military or actively in the Guard or whatever, work for your school. Well, then you could also say like they would have tendencies because of what they do, right? Does that go against your school violence policy? Because if you're training to take out an enemy, right? So it got to be this argument of like saying you can only control or should control so much of what people do outside of what they're doing for you. But anyway, I don't know where this will go, because I mean, you see people like I have a friend who's a teacher, was a teacher, and he started to make videos where he went to state parks, and then he went in and did caving and was doing videos there and got Patreon. He's not married, doesn't have kids, so his economic situation is a little more nimble, but he made enough money. He's been doing this 10 years. His 10-year anniversary was this summer. That's his full-time job, pays for everything that he needs. So he's a content creator. And granted, there are awesome content creators out there. I don't know if you've ever seen the Y Files with AJ Gentile. I mean, that is unbelievable, awesome. But then you just have people who come on and they're like, kind of like what I'm doing now, although unless Bolo makes $100 American super chat right now, I mean, I'm not making money off this. Isn't a livelihood or anything like that. So, but you do have people who just, come on and they'll tell you about their philosophies on something, or, there's one lady that has a channel and she like interviews people who have bad experiences with owning RVs. And she has, a couple 100,000 followers and ads and like paid sponsors and like Pinball Prepper has a pretty popular channel, and he's a retired military guy who talks about civilian prepping and kind of contemporary issues going on in places, and does a show like every day. Dan from I Allegedly, Jeremiah Babe and stuff like that. And it's more like just, hey, here's what's happening in the world and the economy and their perspective on it. And these guys are doing really well. But it is this kind of strange feel to it of just like, you have the opportunity to have an income based upon being like a social media influencer, or if you just kind of keep at it. Again, it didn't work for me, but and then you also have where, people on paid sites. I think what's going to change that really quickly is AI, right? Because it's not, I think it exists out already. There was a story about how a guy created, took an AI bot and basically, so it's, I mean, I have some software that can do that. It's pretty, it's really rough stuff, but like I don't have it loaded up right now, but like there could be an image of a penguin right here and you'd be hearing my voice. But if you have a script, and so basically it's a artificially generated person and they just read through certain news stories. So maybe you're curating some news stories, and I know there's copyright and all this stuff on that, but people do things like that. And then, how long before you have, again, these AI generated, that you're going to be accessing, the people who access content creators behind a paid wall for adult content, that's probably going to move over into AI generated adult content. Just realistically, I mean, that's just probably where that will go in the next 24 to 48 months. If it hasn't started to move there already, like I'm sure people out there thinking, yeah, I could create, this. But I don't know, so I think that I've never experienced the economy like this. It's really bizarre. And, like I guess it works if you're invested right now. I mean, and if you get on kind of the ground floor on some of the cryptos and maybe you sold a little bit to cover like what your cost was to get in, and now everything going forward is basically pure profit outside of like, taxes, I guess, whatever that might look at like. But what happens if there's like was it Mount Block or Glocks or a while ago, maybe early days of Bitcoin, where people had their Bitcoin stolen? So what happens if, yeah. And now as it becomes more mainstream, like a Bitcoin mortgage, and there are pension funds that own Bitcoin, and it's integrated. And what if, again, this gets hacked, like really sophisticated infiltration? There is no safety net on that. I guess FDIC, right? Although it doesn't apply to that. And if the multiple banks collapse, like you'd have to think FDIC deposit insurance wouldn't be worth anything, but it's unregulated. And I think the part that's really, to me, would be scary with crypto is the fact of organized groups going in and targeting and trying to break in and basically take your holdings. And then, then what do you do? Because how do you recover that? You basically wouldn't be able to, because who do you go to? Like the police aren't going to take that on. And so but yet the way I view crypto right now is crypto is a giant sponge, which is very, very necessary to soak up this quantitative easing, which has happened across the world since the pandemic. Trillions and trillions of dollars printed out of air that are filtering somewhat into cryptos. Imagine if tomorrow none of the cryptos existed and all of that money flooded back in. What it would do is just dilute the dollar. It would just cause crazy inflation. So the fact that crypto's out there is actually somewhat probably controlling inflation, as crazy as that maybe sounds, but I think that's true, is it's taking some of these dollars out of circulations, or some of these currencies, these fiat currencies, out of circulation. So bollards help. Yes. Auto investing in crypto 401ks. BOLO. I think that will happen. Right. It's a matter of time before your employer is going to have, what is going on here? Oh, Windows 11 does a few weird things with the taskbar, and it's laid out a little, not that I use it that much, but it's just laid out a little different than what I'm used to. So a safety doc NFT, which could be like the AI generated image thumbnail for tonight's show. I don't know what's going to happen, but it is this really awkward time because it just can't keep going, right? I mean, you can't double people's property taxes. Like in the upcoming year, you can't, and there'll be a threshold on what people will pay for insurances and what people will pay. I mean, it will just hit a breaking point. And we can see, like, McDonald's has said we're way down. Las Vegas is substantially down on people traveling around the world, to Vegas. And but yet you have a lot of people that have a lot of money, so kind of whatever happens doesn't really affect them that much. I mean, if you're if you're worth $10 million and you live in a house that is worth $1 million, but you you bought it and it was $400,000 and now it's $1 million, and you have $10 million, and your insurance goes up, or you're replacing a car, or even if you have some health issues and you're paying your out-of-pocket thing. I mean, those day-to-day things, you just deal with them. I mean, they're largely issues that you can just solve with money. So you don't ride the waves out. But if you're not in that position, especially, like I bought this house 22 years ago. We bought this house and it appreciated, substantially over that time. So it's paid off. But like coming into the housing market now, would you expect first, this amount of money you'd have to have, and then that house would appreciate it the same over the 22 years? I don't think so. Yeah, make more money is the rule, right? And people getting raises and stuff, but then like it just kind of just moves wages and salaries and costs go up. So it just becomes a never ending cycle, right? And where that really hits people is if they lose their job. So a friend of mine lost his job, blue collar, had worked it here in Wisconsin for a number of years, kind of in a rural area. And they just, consolidated substantially things down and just told him, sorry, you're done. So like his options, he's making a living now, self-employed, and he's able to do that, but still, whoa. But yeah, I don't know where I've never seen anything like this, never experienced. And like, I've got neighbors who have a lot of money. Like, I mean, like their monthly household income is probably 20 to 30,000, if not more. So, like $1,000 water bill to keep their lawn green, not a big thing for them. And so you'll see these things, and there's just a lot of things that aren't. It really probably would take a big health event to kind of rock their world, because like the money they've got flowing in is just pretty insane. And I've known people, friends who have made incredible amounts of money just in the last couple of years that have enabled them to upgrade their homes substantially and their, I guess, other possessions. And I'm just like, whoa. I mean, again, not envying that, but I'm like looking and saying, this just doesn't seem like it's the formula. Like how does this work? Because if this is, if the stock market is just in cryptos, you just put the money in and it goes up, like that's not a sustainable system. I think you get these now. You're seeing more on these municipalities, right, that aren't able to provide services, and they're trying to disband or do consortiums with like other municipalities on certain things. And yet it's really weird. Like here in Wisconsin, we have billions of dollars in a surplus for the state, and they're holding on to most of it. I mean, that money should come back, I guess, in my opinion, to the municipalities and the property owners. But yeah, this is an awkward time. Again, I'm a very conservative investor. So, I follow the Treasury direct auctions, and, very familiar with Treasury notes and bonds and durations and returns. And I understand, there's nothing flashy about that. But I also know that sticking to that principle has always been the most successful for me. And it's when I go away from that I'm least successful. So, and I am also unwilling to pay advisors, because one is I don't believe personally in mutual funds. I think there's too much movement. You just don't know what's going on. And then, individual stocks. Yeah, if I had enough money on the sideline, I could see putting together my own portfolio, but then I would want to manage it on my own. But let's say I observed, or I'm dealing with multiple systems that overlap. One must manage. Yeah. One of the things that I did a great job with is consolidating our finances over the last couple of years. I'm going to do that even more this fall. But to kind of work with fewer institutions in that, and then also on the retirement side, to have it very streamlined. For example, I have a couple different sources. One is a pension, a state pension, and then some other more traditional investment that's qualified. So, but how I have that set up is, so the qualified is on, I put it on a schedule basically. So saying, here's the amount of money, here's how much per month over 45 years. And by the way, I'm not drawing this right now. So this, when I get to a certain point in time, which is a little bit down the road yet, and then like that, I expect that I would get this return, which is really low, like below the 20-year average. So to put myself in a really safe zone. And even if I had like zero return, I would still be, I could still manage this. But my approach there was to basically set myself up until I was 105 years old. My wife and I are about the same age. So I think I'm actually setting her up at me to be 107. She'd be 105. Neither of us will live that long. She'll have a chance. There's no way I'll live that long. But basically this approach of like, amortizing the money out. You'd have so many withdrawals, and you look at life expectancy. I mean, the odds of me living to 100 is like one out of 2,200. And then every year after that, yeah, the odds are against you. You're like 99 to 1 that you're not going to make the next birthday after you hit 100. But and I understand, there can be events that happen and things like that, but then also like the house is an asset, and you probably, have some other assets, but so that you could liquidate, downsize from. But there's also a factor in this, which is kind of inheritance planning, like, with our daughters, that if we plan out that far, and it's unlikely we live that long, there would be inheritance might be headed their way, whatever size, I don't know. Depends how long we would live, I guess. But the thing with a pension, like a state pension, is you can take an option where it'll pay out to you. And then if you pass away, it'll pay out to your spouse. You can name one other person, but they have to be like immediate family. It has to be like a kid or a spouse, or I guess it could be a parent or a sibling. I don't know, but it can't like go way out, or you can't just name somebody. And also it doesn't work like, so like I couldn't say, well, you could have it where it would go. So let's say I'm 55 and I'm getting my pension, and I take the plan where I'll take less money, but if I die, it goes to my spouse. Well, there's a safety measure that the pension built in, right? So they're like, well, what if you're 55 and your spouse is 25? So now we'd have to assume that that person is going to live for 50 or 60 years. So if that were the case, like you have to put in the birth dates and all of that, that person gets substantially less. Right. So you can't. But anyway, once you die, the pension, like I said, for me, has an option to go to my spouse, which is the way that we have it set up. And then if she died, then it's done. Then there's no lump payment. There's no perpetual third person it goes to. So you run into this issue where, if you're trying to kind of do estate planning through a pension, it doesn't really work because you can be okay because the pension, if the market goes up, will adjust. It can also go down, or it can also go away. But if you are, say you get to be 80 years old and your spouse and you both pass away, you're 80, 82, and you die, then, anyone that would inherit that, if you're intending for your kids to inherit something, that's gone. That was money that's coming to you and is paying your bills and stuff like that. Where, if you have a 401k, 403b, Roth IRAs, stuff like that, you can set those up a little bit where those can keep going. I mean, if you have a 401k or 403b, which is public, 401k private, and you're taking withdrawals and you pass away at age 80 and there's $300,000 left in the account, it goes to whoever is listed as a beneficiary, right? It just doesn't vanish like a pension does. The payments coming out of the pension. So there is kind of that consideration. I don't know where I was exactly going with that, but Bolo was saying no one is coming to help you. Yeah, that's really evident right now in Milwaukee, in the Milwaukee area after the flooding, the 16 inches of rain a couple of nights ago. And so the TV station's been going around and they're interviewing people, and people are like, my house is ruined. And by the way, like, the city's not showing up. Their insurance, adjuster comes out and says, we don't cover flood, and this wasn't in a floodplain. You don't have flood insurance. So, we're not covering these things. And they're interviewing, these people are saying that. And, you look at the Maui fires, you look at Hurricane Helene, the damage in Tennessee and the Carolinas. And, but you look at these places, right? And these events, and you're right. Nobody is coming to help you. And there, of course, that was something too. Like, they had this little documentary about the LA fires. Well, and how in the Palisades, like, the government came in and cleaned a lot of that out. But as far as like rebuilding and stuff like that, permits aren't flowing. Insurances are, not necessarily covering things. And, but I don't know. You are, Bolo, if you want to share a little bit of your example, but yeah, I mean, just, you're reminded no one's coming to help you. And so that's one of the things too, is I've been really, it is a two-edged sword because, I have a very conservative investment approach, which serves me well and moves me toward the objectives I'm moving toward. But it is also not designed to keep pace with the inflation that we're in right now. So, like, your hand is almost forced into going into stock market and more volatile investments to get the return. Now, as Bolo said, the other flip of the coin is you can just make more money. I mean, and for me, like I know that, right? I can get back and do more consulting, more university teaching. I mean, I'm kind of working on a project. Everything's not doing much this fall, but I mean, once kind of spring rolls around with an entrepreneur who has had very successful businesses that he sold, and you know, you can go out and you can trade your labor for money and kind of keep in the system. But there's a point when that kind of falls apart too as you get older. Or, is it one of these things where you just work and what opportunities are available? Thankfully for me, in the way that am licensed in different areas and things like that, like I have a lot of options, at least now. In the next couple of years, who knows how AI will change things and how budgets will change things. But like, I always have to say no because I'm offered, come work for us, come do this and come do and which I've done. And, those things work out well. But then I also, I don't want to be putting in those hours and those commitments and things, especially as I'm rolling, toward like age 60. I kind of want to move back and scale back, obviously spending. So membership has its benefits. Be a member of the clubs. Wow. Bolo, he is a member. That's good. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's going to be an economic downturn. I mean, again, if we just look at history, right, something will happen. If it's a black swan event, then you'll probably have some government intervention, which will stress the system even more as far as like inflation and supply chain and services, right? You'll have, like after the .com, there wasn't much of a government intervention. After the 2008 housing crash, there was government intervention, but it was, like, remember you could do these projects, but you had to use like U.S. steel, U.S. manufactured things. So when I was a school administrator, we had American recovery money coming in, ERA money, but you had to buy from U.S. vendors, U.S. made things. So we bought like vans and stuff like that for the district, but not like the shoes, like a van you transport students with disabilities. But again, I mean, I don't know. And Bolo, this is a really good point. So you're saying there's like, like 3 trillions in money markets. And so that's money that's on the sideline, not invested. And if there's a lot of money on the sidelines, that's going to keep certificate CD rates in check, 3-4%, or share certificates from credit unions. It's also going to put pressure on treasury rates to not go very high because you don't have people jumping into if treasury rates went up. So let's say that you had a 10-year treasury that was paying 7%. That money is going to flow out of the money market and go and be tied up at 10 years. But then the government, right, is going to have to pay 7% interest on this. So it'd be high interest rates. So they're going to be motivated to keep rates on treasuries, between 3 and 5%. So, what do you do with this money? And there was one thing, I talked with a few investors, and again, because I'm a very conservative investor, and I know that, and I know by having that mindset, just my money isn't making the gains that it would be if it was in some of these other areas, but I'm also walled off from the risk of some of those areas, especially at my age. And I've adjusted my planning and stuff to kind of deal with that. But yeah, there will be some type of downturn because, again, I think just for so many people, it's going to be inevitable to not be able to make the payments, not being able to pay your property taxes, your car payments, your, pulling back from restaurants and things like that. So when the Fed lowers the rates, the money marketers, yeah, I think that's one thing maybe that's happening right now is the Fed is forecasting a rate cut. Now, it won't be substantial because, 0.25, 0.5, but then I can't imagine there's going to be additional rate cuts anytime soon because, again, markets are at a record high. But if people know that a cut is coming, they would move in and try to lock things in at a higher rate. So yeah, 4% is better than 3. So especially if you're investing $500,000, 4% is $20,000 a year. 3% is 15. So everyone doing the math with me there. Ladder CDs. Yeah, I did that for a while. I'm not big into laddering CDs. I guess the way I ladder CDs is I typically ladder a 5-year CD. So most CDs have terms of 5 years or less. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but then some do like a 22-month special or 13 but anyway, let's just kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I will almost always do the 5-year. It's typically the highest rate because you're tying your money up. If not, you kind of have to read the tea leaves. Like, if you think interest rates will go down, it pays to lock in. But then if I take some out this year, take some out next year and a year after, you'll always have CDs coming due, and then you just renew it like 5 years, unless you need the money. But that's where you're trying to have that money grow, and then you're trying to pay your expenses by your job, by whatever you're pulling in on your income. So, or maybe you do some kind of split and you take some interest off of your CDs and that goes into your checking account, and then other CDs just adds to the principal. So, one of the things too is I don't chase CD rates as much as I used to. Meaning I used to go and hunt out CDs like all across the Midwest, right? And try to figure out who is giving the best rates. So there's a lot of websites you can go to that will just compare those things. And PenFed was one I was really interested in for a while, because PenFed has one branch in Wisconsin. They have like one. They don't have like a lot of branches like anywhere, but they have one in Wisconsin. And then they offer a 7-year CD. And part of the thing with CD is you have to check the terms because like some have a penalty of a year worth of interest. Others it's like 90 days. So, but PenFed for a while was really rocking it with the rates. And then you could go 7 years. And I was pretty like locked into that. Discovery, I think, had a 10-year CD maybe 2 years ago, like a 10-year 5% CD or something. Like, oh, that's pretty good. Like being able to lock that in at 10 years. There used to be these things too, like companies would sell you company notes. I bought Ford interest fixed notes like 20 years ago, 20 or 25 years ago. You could go to Ford's website at that time, and they would print it off. It'd be like a page long, fill it out, and then you would pick your term, 2 years, 5 years, all the way up to 10-year. And I think Ford had a 10-year note that I maybe got 7%, 7 or 8% for. I think they used to be like 10% for 10 years, but they don't offer those anymore. But there were other companies, big companies that did that. You could write a check directly to them. they would send you the paper certificate. And then when it came due, I think with Ford Notes, I had to send the certificate back in and like sign the back of it. And then they would send me a check. It was really smooth. Like it was great. And now that's not out there anymore. And if it is out there, I'm assuming you have to work through like a brokerage or something like that, which I don't want to get involved with. I observed 99% yes and 100% no on Fed reduction. I don't know. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. So yeah, I got to be really good as a fixed rate investor. But again, you're in an arena then where you're never going to have big gains. But as some of the investors I would speak with who are kind of similar mindset was, you'll never have a year that you have a loss. And you'll certainly have times you're not making anywhere near what other people are making, but you're still moving forward. And I think there's something to be said for that, especially if you're disciplined and you can do that over time, because things compound over time. So then you have a larger principle that's working for you. And there are some pretty significant nightmare scenarios out there. Let's say you're 70 years old and you have put together over time, a pretty healthy retirement. And suddenly the stock market drops like 40%. So now you're drawing money out while the market is down. And if you're 75, you're taking RMDs, required minimum distributions. And what if the market's down for a decade? What if there's a lost decade and suddenly your money is in half and you can't say, whoa, I don't want to take as much money out as the government is telling me I have to on these RMDs, because like I want that to stay there and grow. I don't want it to come out and be taxed at a high tax level right now while the market's down. Because I mean, again, so that's one of those things you don't have time to recover because you're taking money out of your principal and you're older. So it can really be devastating. I'm getting now connection is unstable, which is weird because again, this is Ethernet and there should be it's like if you're using Wi-Fi, I don't know why it does that, because like literally this is the prioritized system in the house and it's the one closest to where the cable box comes in. And I never notice it on playback of like things get jittery or stuff like that. But money game is different for everyone. That's a really good point, Bolo. That's a really good point, is to, it's easy to kind of look at what others are doing and be like, oh, like I wish I was in the crypto field that Armored Ghost is in and pulling in that kind of money. Or like, I even know, people who have certain jobs and chasing certain things and, but everyone kind of it has to work for you. And then, like money wise, I'm not out there looking to buy a new car. I mean, I'm looking to maintain what I have and keep things, well kept and be able to afford a roof on my house if I need it and stuff like that. But like this shirt, I've had a long time. So, and this shirt will probably stick with me a long time too. Like this chair's 15 years old, but like, yet if I want to do a couple things here in the office, I'll spend some money to upgrade the system here a little bit, because I know that just turns around then if I'm doing consulting and stuff, that it's just better system for me to do that. But I think for me, the concern that wasn't there before, the concern is like, what happens? It's not even like just me. I'm not like but I'm like, what happens to society locally? I'm in the Madison Metro, which is a pretty robust area as far as like growth and jobs. But, there's parts of the state that aren't like that. But again, with remote work, people can kind of navigate that. you can live rurally if you have access to reliable internet and still do your job, I guess. But yeah, you have to have your plan. And again, the only times I've substantially taken a hit on finances is when I've strayed from my own formula. And I'm just not into that. And especially older I get, I think, my goal is to be just a little bit above inflation. And thankfully, because, my house is paid off and I don't have any kind of looming house costs, like a siding or a roof, and my, vehicles are paid off and low mileage. I mean, anything could happen with a vehicle accident, total out, but, I'm not looking for any of these kind of big capital outlays of money. So I am getting older too. Bolo. Wow. It seems everybody's getting older. Yeah. I don't know how, kind of going back to that scenario of required minimum distribution. So if you're like 75 years old, I think that's when that kicks in. Being forced, and then you're getting, again, taxed on that if it's pre-tax, it was put in. But what if the market goes down, the markets, or what if there's a lost decade? People forget about that, like the late 70s and the early 80s, the inflation was so crazy. Like, bank CD notes would pay you 12, 15% 1 year for your money, like in 1981. I remember stuff like that. I remember the banks. I remember my local bank had a table when you went in, like 1980, 81, and on the table, they had different things that you could pick out if you took out a CD. So let's say you had a $5,000 CD, there would be certain things you'd be eligible for. And I remember one thing that my parents let me pick out that I got was a set of screwdrivers, and a nice set, like a Craftsman set of screwdrivers, was there. And again, there would be other stuff. I think there would be like trips, and I mean, it was this like Price is Right type of thing. And you got to just pick, right? If you were putting money in addition to the return on the CD, you got to pick from the prize box. It was really weird. And you don't see that anymore, but it existed. Like I said, I still have the screwdrivers. So buy the dip. Yeah. Who knows what the dip will be? Again, we live in this feels to me similar to, I remember the .com bubble when companies like DoubleClick and Coral, which was like this graphics company, would be like outrageous, like how much they would go up in AOL and all of that. And like, they're not even around anymore. And how I remember trading back in the .com days, and you just put money in, and it was kind of similar to, I guess, to what's happening today. Is it would always go up, and you knew, like, down deep, well, this just doesn't make sense. Like it shouldn't be this easy, but it's like rising waters, float all boats. Yeah, Japanese that's a really good point. Had many lost years. Yeah, very true. U.S. isn't like Japan. Never. Yeah. The thing with the U.S., and this is where people, kind of tell me you're too conservative. Although, like, thankfully, my CPA or my CPAs, or husband and wife, they're also like very conservative, and I think have a similar investment approach to me. I mean, they don't tell me their investment approach, but because I go over things from time to time, and we talk about the tax implications of some of the decisions, but they will say like they expect that there will be there'll be a lost decade. At some point in their lifetime, there will be a lost decade. But also the sentiment of don't bet against the USA, because realistically, if the US market falls, like everything falls, it doesn't matter if you're living in Thailand or whatever, like the whole world economy resets at that point. So, the US can just leverage that like crazy. It is this situation too, where like, where is your safe haven? And, I'm not a big fan also of gold and silver, although I know gold's had this amazing run. And look at this. It's Ron Wayne. I've invested in Ron Wayne Enterprises. It only goes up. The argument with gold, or to me, like against gold and silver, I just don't think it would be fungible outside of like the value that's stamped on it. So if you got a gold quarter or a silver dollar, right, the bank will give you like $1 for it. Like if in an economy crash, I mean, and the thought that you're going to go and take your gold to the, pawn shop or the gold place in town, like in a tough economic times, they're going to lowball you because they'll have a lot of people coming to them. And the second is, where are they going to get their money and get their security? So people aren't breaking into them, and you can't leave the country easily with gold and silver and precious metals, that has to be. And anyway, I understand the argument for it. I also remember I took out a bank CD back in the summer of 2023. And there was a guy who was like 70 years old, and he was in with the banker before me. And it was taking an extra long time and all of that. And then basically, he got done and left. And then I went in and I said, yeah, it seems like it took a while. And the banker said, yeah, he withdrew all of his money and he is buying gold. And I was like, oh. And now looking back, I'm like, if that dude actually did that, like he's doubled his money in 2 years. And who would think? Because like for years, gold was pretty flatline and silver for the most part. Like just really, I mean, just kind of look. And then what's happened? But Armored Ghost is saying gold is just fundamentally a rock. Yeah, you're right. You're not getting dividends out of it, and it has to be priced against something. I mean, to think you're going to carry this stuff with you in any broken down economy and have it be fungible is just not realistic. And then what do you do? Or you become a target of that, or there could be a tax applied. Remember, gold was outlawed, like gold notes, where you couldn't do that. So I just don't see it as, and where do you store it? Like, oh, I have gold, but it's in a safety deposit box. Oh, now the bank like has taken all the safety deposit box property, right? So I get it. But at the same time, it kind of goes back to this discussion we've had before of like, well, how about cryptos? Well, again, it's just numbers on a screen and it can be hacked or unplugged. And then what do you do with it? And how do you transact in something that is changing by the minute, its value, right? So that gets to be kind of weird. And also for the person that's selling or the business, because, during the 3 minutes it takes to complete that transaction, the funds could either go up or down. It's really lead and brass, Ron Wayne, and bats made out of gold, stamped with a Ron Wayne logo. But he is right. Yeah, you're right. So, what is fungible? And that's where I think, land becomes probably a option for a place to sink money, that holds value, but then you could end up on something again that's could end up being taxed like crazy. So I have a friend who's kind of gone the land route. Then I have friends who've gone the real estate route, and saying, well, people need places to live and stuff like that. But I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me, it's not my thing because I don't want to get into being a landlord and all of the stuff that goes with that. But then I know landlords who, during and after the pandemic, when people didn't have to pay the rent and the city wasn't going to evict and the county wasn't going to process, an eviction, the landlords were like, these people aren't paying and I can't get rid of them. So I don't know where the true sink of money is. Sink, I mean, like where to put it, or so yeah. Who was it? It was somebody we know, like us as a group here, bought so much, so many bullets, in the crates and cases, and put it in the corner of their garage that it broke off their their concrete. It wasn't. It had just sheared off. So, yeah, that's crazy. So yeah, I don't know what is happening right now, and you're having more people too. I see this in my town. Increased homelessness, and so you go to the Walmart, and there's an area close as you're kind of coming into Walmart, a grassy area, and there's more people in that area, and they've got their signs, or else now there was a guy like performing like a speaker, and he was playing like a guitar, and it's really loud because by the time like I got to the Walmart, which was probably like 600 feet away, it was still like really loud. When I got to the door, I'm like, holy smokes. And then down by the river, you can just see these things happening. So again, I think you've got this dichotomy. You've got more people becoming very, very wealthy who, okay, like going out to eat to a fast food restaurant was $100. Okay, you're boom, got it, because like we're pulling in 20,000, 30,000 a month. And then you got people who have got down into debt and employment, I think illness is another thing that can just wipe you out. Because again, you're not able to work, or you have, treatments and things that aren't covered. And I think it can be devastating, but for whatever reason, you've got people who just can't claw back into the system, can't get it where they can pay rent, can't get where they can realistically have a shot at a down payment for a house. But again, I see, like I live in an area, as I say, I would be like the cottage for some of the homes around me. I'd be like the place like visitors would stay when they come, stay over there. Like it's our summer cabin. But I know that I have neighbors that I would say, again, have joint incomes of 20 to 30,000 a month, if not more. And so, again, like things like, oh, like it was $1,000 to water my lawn. If that's what they say, well, like last month. Okay. it's 5% of the money you had coming in or something. It's so weird. But it is pretty scary. I just think. I remember that story from one of your streams. Yeah, who it was? Someone that bought so much ammunition that just sheared off their end of their garage. My retirement plan is still homelessness in Canada. Stay warm and stay away from the forest fires. So, yeah, I don't. One thing also, I say one thing quite a bit. I have to pay attention to that. Like I'll play the show back, or not really a show because it's unaffiliated now. It's still under the podcast or the umbrella of the Safety Doc, but I'll be like, oh, I said like one thing like quite a few times, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to have like a unconscious phrase that I'm putting in quite a bit. So, but yeah, it is. I've been watching the CD rates, and again, kind of my planning for things and hedging. But again, I don't know the 4D chess move of if the economy and things really tighten up, and maybe it is AI that's going to upend a lot of this stuff. Maybe, I don't know. But then, I don't want to go down the thoughts of like universal basic income. I haven't really thought about, again, then you get into agency and purpose and what do people do? And I mean, if you're just paying people to be alive, as a society, I don't think that's going to work. Especially on the younger side of people, because they're going to get bored, right? And you're going to just have people then taking that money and rushing to buy either services or material items, and those will be inflated higher. So, one thing, Doc, yeah, I'll write is something I say very, way too much. Yeah. I try to pay attention to that. Look, I like your style. It's Ron. He's like, I'm Ron Wayne. So then he like does like a British accent. It's kind of like Austin Powers, the Kentucky Austin Powers. It's very cool. But yeah, the whole, and everybody, like my parents who grew up in the 40s, right? And they remember, and their grandparents, I remember my grandparents talking about, Great Depression times, and my grandfather, working, driving a milk truck, a Model T. And every time, and the roads are so bad, of course, those roads kind of just started out in the country, like in the 20s and 30s, that he did. You get to where it'd be washed out. You have to take the milk jugs out, those barrels, you've seen them, the milk tins, the containers that they use for decorative. But I mean, you have to take them out of the truck, like carry them across, like drive the truck over. Because if you tried to drive with the truck, like everything would spill out, or I don't know. But he would just tell these stories, just how life was just really rugged, and a lot of it just sucked. I mean, it was just really at that time. And if people got sick, they typically just died because, medicine was fairly primitive. And I mean, when I started in my career, a lot of the old timers that did like school administration, it was not uncommon to be at a conference of a couple hundred, and there would be 10 people there who were polio survivors, and they would, walk with a limp, or they would have a cane or a walker or something. And because, in 1950, as a kid, they had polio. I mean, it's just kind of weird. way things are going. I go through this subdivision too that's being put up not too far from me on this side of town. I'm walking by, and now I can go online. I'm like, boy, this house is like $900,000, what they're asking for it. It's been listed for a while, like these different homes. And I'm like, some of these things just are first, they're made of materials that you just know aren't going to last. So, it's artificial stone that's glued onto the front of the house and thin vinyl siding. And, and I'll look at stuff like this and you'll just be like, or the glitzy thing is to do a house with like, oh, I'm going to do a brown house with like orange accents and like black light fixtures. And I'm like, yeah, that looks cool for about 3 years. And then it starts to fade. And then what do you do? Like I've seen a number of these, if you ever go to the dark garage door, my garage door is white. It's like 1976 Clopay weather door, which is heavy as hell. Like it's like a hurricane door, like reinforced steel and like, it's white. And I just had to repaint it once. And then I had to repaint the inside panel a couple times because it gets rust and I have to sand it down. But anyway, but you look at this stuff and I'm like, and then how are you going to match this up down the road too? Like there's so many weird little knick-knack things or like just kind of goofy trim or the roof angles. Like I have just a very straightforward roof. Like to roof this house is a pretty easy process. But you look at these places and there's like angles all over the place and just these optical illusion type things. And I'm like, yeah, again, like that seems okay now. Or you'll see these little puny air conditioners like up on a metal bracket. They're not even sitting on the ground. I don't know about that, if that's a code thing, because I have seen mine sits on a concrete slab. And it has since it's been out there since 94. But I don't know if that's like a new thing but I'm like, what are you getting for this? But again, I mean, if the thought is, well, houses just become more valuable. So you buy it for 900,000 and 10 years, you could sell it for 1.4, which I don't think is realistic, but Ron, my day, we walked to school barefoot. Wow. I lived 1 block away from my K-8 school and 1 block away from my high school. So they were on different sides of me. So I grew up, which then my friends would always like stop over, like if there were football games and stuff we had, like I would just stay in town, stay at my house. But my side hustle could be weatherman. Shock jock. Wow. This was another thing I've been reading where smaller TV stations are outsourcing their weather to, there are a lot of individuals or smaller companies now who are saying we don't have to be in Kentucky. We're here in Florida or Arizona. We can get all the feeds for the radar. We can do everything and just cut to us and we'll do it. So I have a friend who is at a TV station. He said there's a huge like spin right now. People trying to get into the bigger markets where the personality is more important. Because then the TV station, those people go out to different events and stuff like that. So there's a lot of promotion they're doing. But in the smaller areas, I think you're going to see a lot of these TV stations just go. Like, if you're in a community of 50,000 and under, I think your television station, and a number of the stories too said, without the money flowing in from recent elections into these small markets, small market TV, millions of dollars, which could be like half of their entire income for that year, like last year, like they'd be gone already. So, I don't know. in the, well, actually, yeah, it probably would be in the snow because I grew up in northern Wisconsin. So if you said it, Doc, I'd believe it. So, wow. I like finances a lot. I think if I were to go back and to kind of pick, if you could pick a different career and, path and stuff like that, I think finance is what I would have done. And I think I would have been very good at it because I'm very interested in it. And then I also think it would have had the benefit of directly helping me. So again, like if you train to become a nurse, well, now you have those skills that you can extend throughout your entire family. If someone isn't feeling well or they get hurt or whatever, like you have those transferable skills to benefit yourself and those around you. And I think it's the same thing with like finance. If you really understand finance, like you studied it and then you have different jobs, whatever you decide to do in that area, I think it just again translate into something that your life. So for example, like if you're an airplane pilot, I would think, like I had a neighbor who was an airline pilot for like one of the big airlines. I think it might have been American, young guy. So you'd go to Madison and that's where they would fly him out. And then, they would assign you different routes and whatever. And then you would get to come back with his family. And he got out of that actually to go into finance. So I think he only did that for like 5 years. And he just said for him, it was way too crazy. The pace of it. But I think, being a pilot, that set of skills doesn't immediately transfer clearly back to your well-being and family, right? So, whereas if you're a doctor or a nurse or finance, or if you're a mechanic or a machinist or stuff like that, then it comes back. Like if I'm working and I'm in HVAC, well, then I can take care of my own HVAC system or my family HVAC system, and I understand these, or I might be able to leverage that with friends so they can do some plumbing and I can do some HVAC for them. Or if I'm a farmer, right, like I can grow my own food. So I understand how that works, or I understand how to kind of read markets a little bit, like different is it going to be high cost of oranges this year or wheat or whatever. So I think it's important. And I also think that it's important to have a job where you're not dependent upon a system. So again, like former chef, that's a good example. So if you're a chef, right, like you're dependent upon there being a restaurant and the restaurant doing advertising and having the liability and all the overhead that goes into the restaurant. The way you can get out of that is if you maybe open up your own food cart, right? And you'd have to go that direction. But if you're a chef, you're locked into that. If you're a software engineer working for a company and you get laid off, unless you're building your own software, right, you're not going to be able to kind of easily use those skills professional. So it's Ron Wayne, or if you're Ron Wayne, for means you can have a pet pig or farmer. Yeah. Chicken and cow. And and I think this whole thing from the pandemic, I wrote about it in the Velocity of Information, Essential, Non-Essential. This is where I knew a dentist at the time who had just, kind of started out the practice. And he was saying at the start of the pandemic, like dental offices were closed and he had a pretty large staff. And a lot of them couldn't come in because they were cutting back on how many people could be in the lobby and in the building. And he only had so much space, which wasn't a lot. And he has his bills that he has to pay. And he said it was pretty terrifying because like, well, what is this going to look like? Now again, I would still think like as a great career, but at that moment in time, it was you really couldn't turn in any direction and make that viable. So that was another thing with like, you want, I think, to be very aware of a job that if we go back to essential, non-essential, like if you're an entertainer and you're tied to a venue, and stuff like that, or, like there were, let's say Major League Baseball, season got cut short. So all the people who work to support the stadiums and that normally would do that, not necessarily the players, but the ancillary, they were all gone. So is society too complex? Does the average person actually understand payroll? Yeah, I think yes, too complex. And then also, I wouldn't say too big to fail, but if you look at like what, $37 trillion and growing, too abstract, right? No one can really understand what that looks like. I mean, show me something that is equal to $37 trillion. Like you can look in the billions. You can say, well, like this stadium costs like $3 billion to make. And you can go there and see the stadium and walk around and do things, and it's tangible. But when you talk trillions of dollars, like that's so abstract that people just tune out and they just want to live their own lives and be left alone. But yet you start operating at in these insane structures that have no way to sustain themselves. And then, again, do you just ignore 37 trillion, or what's the difference between 37 trillion and 100 trillion? I mean, really, like from a functional standpoint. And then what if, the government comes out and issues a 100-year treasury note at 3%, and you start getting these, what if your house loans, you start getting a 50-year home loan and a 15-year car loan. And I mean, all of these systems could get really out of sync where it would like extend beyond your lifetime. But yeah, 37 trillion is a couple of houses in San Francisco. Yeah. It is. So I think it's just really hard to conceptualize, and that people tune out of that. So again, I mean, I think people for the most part just want things to be at the store when they go there. They want their utilities to work and baseball to be on TV. And it's a really odd time. At least I think it is. And I've people I've talked to who are my age and older will typically say the same thing. Like we don't remember a time like right now. And I'm thinking, yeah, and what would it look like if there again is a contraction, I guess. I don't know. It'd be hard to see a collapse, although I suppose it's possible. But you're going to have fewer people going to universities and post-secondary. I mean, one, because there's just fewer people of that age. And the second is they're not going to need 4 or 6 years to do whatever. They're going to get certificates or do other things. Or so this whole thing of like, post-secondary is going to rapidly change and be restructured K-12 eventually will get there. I mean, that's just, there's hasn't been enough impetus to evolve that because the money is there. It's guaranteed and it's coming in. I think if the money tightened up, there would be more creativity in how that system is kind of assembled. But where I'm at, we've lost a few private colleges. We've lost a number of 2-year campuses, probably 3 or 4 in the state. And those have been there like solid since the 60s. And yeah, regardless of what happens, Nebraska remain the same. Probably, and Kentucky. Donuts. I was thinking about donuts today, Ron Wayne. So quick trip Dunker Donuts. So I haven't had a donut for a while. Donuts are $1.50 at the grocery store. Festival Foods, which I like. Festival Foods. But like I cannot bring myself to pay $1.50 for a donut. It just is like I'm just looking at that saying like that should be 50 cents. I just can't do it. Cheeseburger in Paradise. I remember that, right? Jimmy Buffett. Do you remember the song Cheeseburger and a Coconut? That was a great song, Cheeseburger and a Coconut. I'm not making that up. I'm going to post the link to it. So when I was cleaning out my kind of technology storage room, which is, usually parts that were left over from when the system was built. And I've got the monitor that was in the front here is there kind of as a spare. I found, here, just wait a second, cheeseburger, coconut. All right. You will love this song. It's Cheeseburger and a Coconut by the Ron Wayne Band. Did I not link it out? Well, you can copy and paste it if it didn't. So cheeseburger in a coconut. Yeah, donuts. Oh, 7-Eleven. They're $1.99 each. Yeah, see, I've got until I think it expires. That expires tomorrow. I can get a free donut at Quick Trip with my rewards card. So, but yeah. So I don't know what your thoughts are on the economy and what you see and what you think might happen and how you're preparing for it. I mean, there's this other side of things where there could be a run up from in markets, as money comes off the sideline or whatever, and the Dow could go, up 20%. And now people suddenly have all of this new wealth. And again, I know people who in the last probably 3 years have doubled or tripled their income. I mean, either through the value of their house, and then they would take out a mortgage, or they would the value of their house just has gone up. Like, yeah, I guess it's unappreciated. It's not an appreciated. It's an unrealized gain. But then also like just their investments have doubled, and their wages have gone up significantly. And I'm like, holy smokes, I am pretty floored by that. But then I'm like, this isn't natural. This isn't how things are meant to work. So yeah, you don't pay taxes, right? Isn't that crazy? Like on your house. I mean, the property taxes I pay are very high, and they just continue to go up. My property taxes have doubled in the last 3 years. And the weird thing was, like, for the first 15 years I was here, my property taxes were almost the same every year. And now, they've doubled, and and the insurance on the house continues to increase. And thankfully I don't have a mortgage, so I don't have to have like that tier of coverage that you'd have to have if you had a mortgage. But Mike does not eat donuts. Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania. So, wow. Put the lime in the coconut. Yeah. You put the lime in the coconut. So I think it would be a fun show to kind of just talk about what's happening in finances and where this might go. I've been thinking more on my own of, like, I have the ability to hedge pretty well by trading labor for money. And I can do that at a higher rate, not like, a surgeon level rate, but because of what I do, there's, and what I've done, there's typically always demand. And because I'm also protected somewhat by licensure as a barrier of entry into the things that I do, and a little bit by the PhD. But, I'm looking and saying, I need to keep my foot in the rink here for, probably more years than what I was thinking. I mean, not at a full-time capacity, but, at a part-time capacity, and maybe a little more than what I was kind of initially planning. So that's, and thankfully, I have the option to do that. But again, at some point, you kind of do a full switch over to retirement, and then what do you do? What can a dollar buy anymore? Yeah. So good point. And there's a strange side of that, Ron, also, is I went on Madison, Wisconsin Craigslist under the free, people giving stuff away. And there's a lot of junk like people try to give away, right? Like, old couches and things like that. But there are just other things that do have value that people say, just come and take this. Like, here's a dumbbell set, and I don't want to take up room in my house anymore. Come over here. You have to take all of it, but it's free. So, like, and clothing, some of those types of things. So I've seen more free things that actually are valuable, but people just don't want them anymore. And that's kind of caught my attention too. And I'm thinking, maybe there's more people who everywhere you drive now, there are these storage units, right? These storage, and God, in my town, since I've been here in 20 years, it has to be 20 times the amount of storage sheds, that you're paying $200 a month to store your stuff in a building. And like, that you probably visit twice a year just to add stuff to. You're never like going through and curating. You're just not getting rid of stuff because, maybe you moved or you're going to move or whatever. Or you have stuff that's seasonal. So, hey, I'm going to store it, the skis and stuff like this or whatever in a shed. I worked with somebody early in my career. We were both in our 20s, and she and her husband saw this vision of the future where storage units, were going to be a thing. And she got out of education, and her husband left what he was doing, and they invested all their money into a group of storage units. So whatever, let's say they had 30 or 40 to start. And then they just kept building. They get more, they acquired more. And for a while, then they had people who had a side business where if you left your stuff in the storage unit and you didn't pay, they would auction the storage unit to the highest bidder. So they would have people then, who might pay a couple $100 to clear, but then they had to have an agreement that you'd clear out. So if there's stuff in there that's not worth anything, you're responsible. And if you don't do it, you can never bid again. But apparently like that in the last like 5 years is really not much of a thing anymore. And I was reading about that. And the reason is people would store drugs in these storage units. So then people would be the winning bidder and they'd come in and then they would end up having to call the police because they would find, cocaine or that someone was making meth in this thing. And then, so they lose out, they don't have the money or the other stuff is contaminated or they're exposed to that. So, but yeah, so I think there's also this thing where people are like, well, what can I just get rid of? Because I don't want to pay the storage unit cost. So they're just like, here. And there's a boat in Madison and it's, I think it might be in Lake Mendota. It's in a lake. It's in a slip and it's a sailboat and it's called No Problem is the name that's painted on it. And it's free. And underneath it said, you can't part it out. There's no trailer. There are no sales for it. Here's what works. Here's what doesn't work. And it's 1982. It was made. And it's like, has never been damaged, but has also not been kept up in the last 10 years. And that thing has been listed for free for like a year. So nobody will take that. But that's just a strange thing. And the pictures of it look pretty good. But I'm sure like once you get there, you're obviously looking and being like, there's a lot of work. So, why would you do that? But I think there is something really neat to kind of analyze society through the free stuff. If I need a storage unit to store my stuff, to categorize my priorities. That's kind of like me. I don't have a storage shed. I'm kind of the only one in my area who doesn't. My neighbors, one of them has two. And they're all really neat because they're like made to look like their houses, but I don't have one. And I was thinking about getting one years ago and storing like my wheelbarrow and fertilizer spreader, stuff like that out there and free up a little room in the garage. But I was like, no, I can get everything in the garage. And then for a while I was thinking, well, above my garage, because I have Douglas fir rafters, like I could floor off some of that and then get a better ladder system and go up and store some stuff. But then I'm like, yeah, that works now. But as I get older, like that's not going to work for me to haul stuff up and down a ladder and store it on top my garage. So just get rid of stuff. There was a show on A&E called Storage, where people buy. I remember that, Mike. Yeah. So apparently, like that was a pretty competitive thing. And then if you own these storage units, and some people just had where they had the person who would come in and clean the stuff out, and that person then would, clean it out and resell it. So you never had to worry about that. I mean, imagine buying that and suddenly like that's a weight off your shoulders. So depends on the boat. You can have it towed away and buddy has some good engine. Yeah. I'm guessing the boat doesn't have an engine because it's a sail. It's a large sailboat though. So you think there'd have to be some engine unless there's like a way to hook an outboard. I don't know how any of that stuff works, but looking online, maybe I'll be able to bring it up here. It just struck me. Like, I think you could choose to live very frugally and kind of comfortably within limitations. Like I said, I think where things kind of fall apart for anyone is medical. Yeah, let me bring this up. There's the boat. It's free. It says no problem right there. It's free. It's been there and it's been listed for a year. So, and from my perspective, like, I don't know, seems like a pretty nice boat. 1982 O'Day, manufactured in Kentucky. In Pennsylvania, it's a hybrid. So I'm looking at this thinking, like, out of that whole boat, there's not money to be made. Like, but you would have to assume then that salvagers would look at this thing and say, no, it's just not worth it. So I don't know. It's really strange, right? Like there it is on the free stuff. So Coda Armor All on that. And you could take that up the Mississippi River and somehow get it to Bolo in Canada. So yeah, might have a small, I don't know. What are the details? 23-foot. Let's see what they list here. See the other pictures. Yeah. Okay. So free boat, no trailer, no motor, needs sails and lines. You take the whole boat, no parting out, free. Yeah. Condition is fair. So but doesn't this seem weird? Again, no problem. I don't know. To me, it's unsettling. It is really, yeah, 3 hour 2. It did kind of have a Gilligan's Island feel to it. I don't know. Like I said, it's probably just more unsettling to see things like that. And it'd be interesting to like talk to this person because they'd probably be like, whatever the reason is, they couldn't keep it up. And the fact that there's apparently no resale on it because otherwise you listed for a price, right? I don't know. Those are the type of things that really have me, I'll be out and like the Socratic method, like talk to yourself, right? I'll be like, that just doesn't make sense. Like that has an alternate reality feel to it. Something is really off. A multiverse effect, like that just doesn't seem like that should be real. Probably Ron is right. If the thing's haunted, well, that's your answer right there, because no one wants a haunted boat. So doesn't matter. That's a deal breaker. Ron's right. You might look at it and then you're like, ooh, and I'm like, I'm out of here. I don't want to deal with it. They're like, wait. So I'm like, ooh, just waiting to be struck by lightning. Yeah. So I wonder what the winter storage deal was on that. If it just froze itself in the lake and then unthawed, or bust out another $1,000. Yeah. I think, yeah, again, I have a couple of friends with boats, and they have said you have to license it and then you have to have insurance on it too. And they're like, in Wisconsin, the amount of time you imagine you're going to use this boat, unless you're on a lake. I mean, it's a little different. My brother, like on a lake. So for him, it's not a big stretch to get the boat out. But if you have to put a boat on the trailer or haul it somewhere, do the slip thing, like, we have the boat slip for the Wisconsin River. Like, I go by that quite a bit. It's not nearly as busy as it used to be, even on like really nice days. And I think people are just like, I just don't want to deal with waiting 30 minutes to like put my boat in and then park the trailer and then whatever it costs to license this thing and then insurance and then other people out there. And so, the two happiest days in a boat owner, yeah, Day they buy it and day they sell it. Yeah. See, Mike, you're right on. And maybe it's the same thing with that dude over there, on the of trying to get rid of this sailboat. So yeah, I think things like that, just happen. I was looking at getting rid of my camcorder. I have one, and I bought it 10 years ago. Still the box. It's a Canon VR 700. It's nice. But I don't use it anymore. I haven't used it in 5 years. Great shape. I had a fisheye lens I bought for it too, that you could get some cool wide shot images. I had a little extra aftermarket thing because it had a LED panel that flipped out so you could watch when you were recording, handheld camera recorder. Well, that video was recorded on it of me up and throwing the first pitch out. But it would shield it so the sun wouldn't reflect off the screen, because otherwise the contrast was really bad with that. Like if you're out in the sun, like trying to figure out what was on the screen, it got washed out. But I'm like, I don't need this anymore, and I'm not going to use this ever again. And even though it's like really works well, so I was going online and thinking like I might be able to get $100 for it, like with the box and everything shipped. I've seen some of them, but realistically, probably not. But I don't know what I paid for it. I'm sure it was much more than that, but I just want to get rid of it. It doesn't take up a lot of space, but like things like that. So whoa, get my papers. This guy here. I live near the Ohio and Beaver River. This is Mike, and I don't see boats as much as I used to this summer. Interesting, Mike. Thanks for sharing that observation. Yeah. I've noticed that big time. Again, like there's a really nice boat landing, and it's wide, and then there's a big section for parking your trailer and all of that. Here where I live, and the city like did a lot to improve that, maybe over the last 10 years. And the Wisconsin River has been at normal or a little above water levels. So, you're not running into sandbars and anything like that. And I would bike past that, and, you'd have 10 trucks lined up with trailers to get in. And then you'd have 20 in this area parked, and these boats would be, all over, because we have a wide area of the Wisconsin River where I live. And it literally now is 2, and you just don't see people doing that anymore. Another thing that I've observed, and my daughter, notices too. So my daughter and I will go to the basketball courts in town, and our town has some really nice parks and playgrounds, and then basketball courts where they have like blackboards, and so it's really nice because I don't have a hoop at my house, so we'll go and we'll play on these courts, and we're the only people there, and it's 80 degrees out and sunny, and then next to it is a really nice playground, right? And maybe if we're playing for an hour and a half shooting around, there might be a family that stops by with a couple kids for 20 minutes and then they're gone. Or other days, there's like nobody there at all. And the baseball fields, we went, and I think I was sharing, my daughter doesn't play softball anymore. She's really good at it, but it's not her sport of interest. But I can get her to like toss the ball like twice a summer with me. And we have a really nice softball, baseball complex the school has. It's walking distance from our house. And we walked down there, nobody there. Again, 1:00 in the afternoon, 80 degrees, anybody can go there, right? I mean, just as a kid, bike over there, and nothing's locked. I mean, it's just regular, and it's just like, whoa. When I was a kid, we had one baseball field in town, and it was a block from my house. You had to cross the train tracks to get there, and when I say kid, like 8 to 11, maybe right in that range, 8, 11, 8 to 12. And in summer, unless it was raining, by 8 in the morning, you'd be up there. And my friends in the country, they would either walk in, bike in, or their parents would drop them off, would kind of cluster them. And then at noon, the fire whistle would sound, and that was the end, and then we'd be done. And we would split into teams, and the older kids just automatically were the ones who would divide the teams and like make the rules and the calls, and you just went with it. And we thought that was just the greatest thing ever. There was one outlet on the backstop, this metal backstop, because the city would play like, their tavern league ball there and little league at night, but like during the day. But you'd have 20 kids, right? And then I brought up a boom box, and you could plug it in this outlet, and we had set it on a picnic table behind the backstop. So then you'd be able to listen to the radio too. I mean, I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And now, no, the kids don't do that. They don't self-organize. They don't do this stuff, and they don't like acknowledge the older kids have authority. We had one kid, Mike, who was a year younger than me, and Mike had one leg. He had one leg from just below the kind of hip, like removed. I think it was like cancer. Mike's still alive today. A great guy, but he had had a wooden leg, right? We're talking like late 70s. And so Mike would show up, and Mike was a good player, but of course Mike had one leg. So what one of the older kids just went, he got a piece of cardboard out of they have these 55-gallon metal drums, because the beer league, they'd always have the Busch Light, or whatever, the Budweiser cases of cardboard would be there. And then he ripped off a section and put it down. He's like, well, this will be Mike's first base. And it would be like 6 feet closer than the base. But once Mike got there, then like second, third, and home, he had to get to those. There were no shorter bases for that. But that was just, and everyone was like, yeah, that makes sense, because Mike can't go, run very fast. And when he's on the base, maybe, or maybe they would say like Mike can take like a 3-foot lead, or maybe they might just go over there with their foot and draw a line on the sand, which was kind of like a gravelly sand mix, and just say, this is where Mike can do a lead off, and you can't pick him off. And everyone was fine with it. And you just kind of knew, that. But again, there's so much societal change, and not everybody had a baseball glove. So like when you were on offense, your baseball glove was usually in somebody else's hand who was playing out in the field. And the same thing with bats. Like we could kind of assemble like 3 or 4 bats, and, a couple wooden ones, aluminum, dented, whatever. And that's what you had. And then baseballs was kind of a mix too. Nobody had anything fancy, but, man, I really miss those days. I cannot underscore how awesome that was. So we'll kind of wrap it up here. My Uncle Ed used to live down inlets in Kentucky. He had a pontoon boat and a bass boat. Sold both when he moved back to North Indiana. He sold them to Ron Wayne. Wow. Like, same year, we have several city parks, never, always vacant. Yeah, that's eerie. That's not new. Like, I kind of noticed that trend up, a while ago. Like, when my kids were growing up and we would go to the park with them, it'd be like, wow, seems weird. And we also have like a swimming area, a beach in town, Silver Lake. And I would, in summer when I would walk kind of that route by the airport and this beach, like when our kids were young, we'd go out there, like there would be hundreds of people at this beach and every parking spot would be taken up and down the road. And now 85 degrees and sunny, again, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, parking lot's half full. And you're just like, whoa, and as a parent, like you think, go to the beach, it's free. I don't need a permit, be fun for the kids. And it really stands out to me. Went down to visit Labor Day weekend. This is my 2013. We went on our pontoon boat, went along for the ride, didn't drink beer. Got it. Sounds like it was a good trip. Yeah, that does sound like a good trip. I also hung out on the dock with my Aunt Karen. I was trying to fish. Just drank beer, drowned worms, Mike. Ron said, I was going through some of my old stuff at my parents' earlier this summer and found my old wiffle bat and ball. Sure brought back memories. Holy smokes. Yeah, wow. I remember when we play wiffle ball. Wow. That would bring back memories. Mike said he had property down the road from his house. And he called the firm. Wow. Ron Wayne. It was this hunting land and shooting range. Holy smokes. So, yeah. Well, I'm going to keep kind of be interesting to see how many days the stock market just goes up 400 points, because it seems like that's a trend we're on. But yeah, it is really, if you think of it, I mean, now people are kind of used to it, but you look at these, again, parks and really nice places that don't cost you anything. And I don't know if it's just because kids don't have an interest in that. Families don't have an interest in that. I can't make sense. I can't make sense of it, to be honest. So, well, Mike, it's funny when you find things. Yeah, back memories. Yeah, when I was sorting through my file cabinets a few weeks ago, and it was the first time I did that extensively since we moved here. I found I would find like articles that I had published that were in magazines and stuff like that. But I found like notes from former students, like an email saying, hey, like this was a great class or something, it'd be like 2007. I'd be like, oh, like, that was kind of nice to read. Like I didn't know that existed, but at the time I printed it off and put it in a file. But yeah, I also found like my old firefighter certificates, like when I had gone through all of that in the 90s. Like I knew I kept that. I just didn't know where it was. And then I found that in a file. I think it was misfiled behind like an oven range or something like that. And I'm like, oh, like this is pretty cool. But I don't think I made a folder for that. Like I probably couldn't find it again. I probably should have put a dedicated folder for that. I actually like found my, I knew I had it like years ago in the fire. The way that they would do it is you would have the basically would be like a credit card size, and it had your name and like all your had your social security number on it. And when you would go to a fire, you'd have to turn in your card, and that was the way that they would track like who was on the scene. Like, oh, like David didn't come out. We got the card here, so that's the way the system was done, real analog. And it did have your social security number on it. So, and I was like, where is my card? Like, I know I didn't get rid of that. And I found it. Again, now I don't know where the hell it is because, I think it's down here, but I could be wrong. It could be, it's kind of crazy. Like I find these things like I've been thinking about for 10 years and then I don't kind of do the extra step of actually like putting in a file or something and marking it. but yeah, that was kind of a cool thing to find. Like that brought back memories. Yeah, I remember like it just it, I re, one of the things I struggled with in firefighter training is I had a hard time figuring out a plat book. So a plat book, is all of the land, and then it's broken up into coordinates, right? So like if it's a fire in the country, and it's not necessarily at a specific building, but you have to go somewhere on a piece of land. Like, how do you get there? It's like a wildfire, right? And I'm like, someone has to help with that. That's not my thing. Give me other stuff to do. But I don't, it was just, I don't know. It was just a flaw in the operating system. I could never figure that out. But I aced everything else. So that's a whole other story too. Like there are so many recent documentaries coming out of like different, states of like, here's Wisconsin and the struggle with getting fire departments staffed, and the shrinking fire departments, and the cost to replace equipment is prohibitive, and the fact that aging equipment, you really can't throw a 1950 engine out on the road anymore, even though it has 25,000 miles, because your insurance carrier is like, we can't insure that anymore. So equipment is being aged out a lot faster. And like my community is at a, $2 million midship aerial, come in that, hopefully it'll last them 20 years. But yeah, the training and how these people are going to be available to show up for calls and stuff like that. Are you going to get to a point where you're substantially going to see a change in the fire service? So, I don't know. I mean, there will be. So you're beyond the card. Yeah, I remember. I remember that the cards. So, like at a fire, there would be a board that all the cards would be. It would be like almost clothesline, but it was metal. And it would clip them on. The cards weren't magnetic, but then they would indicate like who showed up and then how they were deployed and all of that. And then you get your card back at the end. So, but yeah, the fact that your social security number, like that was just a thing that they did, back then is, yeah, what else do you want to put on it? So I never played football myself. I did enjoy baseball. I played football and baseball. I wish I could still play football. I really miss playing football. So, and I miss playing baseball too. But I really do miss playing football. So, yeah, I was team captain, I think 3 years. And yeah, you don't realize like how small of a window you really have to play football until like you're older and you're like, oh, like, cause I played softball when I was in college. So you could kind of keep the baseball thing going for a couple of years, but like football doesn't exist that way. I mean, once you're done, you're kind of done, or you're not going to take those risks with your body. But, yeah, I had a lot of like memorable things in football. Like, I led the team in sacks. I had one, we played, I remember one game we played, the team had like the best running back in the conference. This guy was just unbelievable. And they would run mostly between the tackles, and I was a nose guard. Yeah, or like defensive end, but like I was like playing nose guard that season quite a bit, which is like across from the center. And And the first play, like they hand it to this guy and he comes at me and I'm just like lucky enough to do a Bobby Boucher and get a good solid tackle and like stop him right there. And I'm thinking, man, this is not like after the one play, I'm like, this is not sustainable. Like this guy's just going to grind me down. He was bigger than I was and he was just better than I was. But I had stopped him a couple times on that run and they just abandoned it. And they started to like run him outside and he was having success so like I was just amazed because like for that game, it seemed like this illusion that, oh, you're not going to run up against like this guy. And I'm like, no, you could have. You just like, you would have kept going. Like that would have been wide open for you. But that was, oh my God. Yeah, tackling field. I got kicked out of a game. So I had 2 back-to-back unsportsmanlike penalties, both for dropping a quarterback late. And I got kicked out, and it was an opposing team where we were playing, and I had to sit on the bus per the refs. And then the assistant coach, they couldn't leave me on the bus by myself. Like the fans were really angry, the other side. So he had to be on the bus with me. And I remember then I thought I was really going to be in trouble. And we got into the locker room. We lost the game. And our head coach said to me, he's like, man, he's like, I just know how much this game means to you and the emotion. And I was like, yeah, I was really undisciplined. And I was thinking you had every right to like just chew me out. But he totally thought like I was just like over the top, like emotion into it, which I guess I kind of was, but I wasn't thinking and it hurt the team. But yeah, I don't know. I just miss that. My brother went to school with the chief of the Bridgewater Fire Department. He's got an old Mack fire truck and a 50s Dodge. Wow. Very cool. Mom and dad never pushed me to play football. I think it's because my dad's brother Bobby played in the neighborhood and messed up. Yeah. I was fortunate to not have any kind of, substantial or lasting injuries that I guess I'm aware of from football. But man, we had a guy on our team, Perry, who was a running back and messed up his knees, had to have surgery. You're talking about like 17 years old. And then like perpetually through life, it's impacted him. Like, and I'm like, oh God. So I don't know. I don't know if I would go back and play. Like I said, I do, I do miss playing football. So, look at this tackle doc. The best when I was, the best block when I was on offense, I was a center. So that's probably why I was a nose guard defense, center on offense. And it was, we're playing a Division I school non-conference. So school, 15 times bigger than us. And we played them on the road at their place and we beat them like 42-30 or something, which was crazy. And we just had this unbelievable game where like everything went right for us. So we just played unbelievably well. Travis Smith was our running back that game. And he was bananas. Terry Hall was one of our running backs. Forgot his helmet. He had to borrow someone's that game. And I threw a block. Yeah, it was a pulling center, pulling guard, but pulley up. We had to play with a pulling center and guard. And I threw the best block I ever threw in my life. And I remember like the coach played it back when we did like tape and just said like, this was like textbook. And I'm like, yeah, it just worked out that way. Like it was unbelievable. And it freed him up to do a touchdown. But oh God, those were good times. Yeah. No, when I go to my hometown, like every once in a while I kind of check out the football field area. It's much nicer now, of course, but wow. Yeah, the water suck Gatorade is better. So wow. Our high school here in town where I live, I was walking through like their football practice area yesterday because there's a trail that kind of comes down and where subdivision is through there. But they had out a garden hose connected to CPVC pipe with holes in it as their area where the players get water. Well, CPVC, right? So you can run hot or cold water. But I'm like, geez, man, like that doesn't look like a smart setup, because like all those contaminants that can get in that and just like, mosquito larvae. And I mean, in this day and age, like seriously, like this is your setup. It's just, it's this long garden hose running to the spigot on the side of the school and this thing. I'm like, yeah, that just does not, invest in a couple, big Gatorade jugs that you fill up with, bag of ice and water. That just floored me. I was like, from even a disease standpoint, you read about people who've, had like a brain eating amoeba or something. I'm like, this just seems like this is not good. Water boy. Bobby Boucher. Yeah. Gatorade is better, says Ron Wayne. You're drinking the wrong stuff. You're not drinking the distilled Kentucky water. So, God, I love that movie. So, I think I have the DVD. I'll never get rid of that one. Give them water. Yeah, it's really weird. It just says what, and it's not like well maintained. Like the CPVC pipe is like warped. And you can tell like they've used it for a couple of years because it definitely has sun damage too. And I'm like, man, this just isn't cool. Plus, like, again, just what I said is like you should have, 2 of those bigger Gatorade type containers that you fill up with water and throw a bag of ice from the Quick Trip, which is right down the school, or that you have an ice maker, and you bring it out there, have somebody do that. I don't know. It's just really weird. So, all right, guys, I have a lot of stuff on deck. This was really fun. So I'm going to get going, but before I do, we are going to show Ron Wayne, and he is watching a sailboat competition in Kentucky, and he's also and his good friend Mike McClune has come down in Bolo, and they're all watching this. But then a ghost shows up, and here's what happens.
Holy shit, a ghost.
Ooh.
Do you mind moving out of the way? You're blocking the TV.
Oh, shit. Sorry, man.
It's okay. Thank you.